Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to BW Legal World's Saturday Solution segment, where we speak with experts on hot legal topics and latest legal developments. And today, we will be looking at solutions to some of the legal and regulatory challenges plaguing our Edtech sector, that is the education plus technology sector. To know more and to make this discussion fruitful, we are joined by Ms. Seema Jhingan, founding partner, LexCounsel Law Offices, Mr. Amar Sindram, General Counsel, Senior Vice President, Legal, NEC Corporation, India, and Mr. Vinod Joseph, Partner, Argus Partners. I am your host, Ashima Ohri, Managing Editor of BW Legal World, who has the honor of moderating this August session. Experts, once again, a very warm welcome to all of you and to our audiences joining us across various platforms. Let's dive right into the conversation with our panelists now. So, panelists, according to reports, India, that boasts the world's second largest e-learning market after the US, raised USD 3.3 billion compared to a total of USD 2.22 billion in 2020. Globally, the edtech industry is projected to almost double to USD 404 billion by 2025 from USD 227 billion in 2020. Let's understand from you, what is the status of this industry from a legal and regulatory perspective and its likely impact on the future of education in India? So starting with Seema. Seema, your opening comments, please.
So good morning, afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be with you. See, education is one of the most dynamic sectors in the world, not only in India. And education encompasses between itself the K-12, the preschools, the university education, the higher education, the soft skill services companies, the support services providers to the education, and then you have education edtech. The dynamism of the sector is so large that as per the Brand Equity Foundation report in 2016, we were standing at, I think, 100 billion for India. This is the Indian numbers that we are talking about, 100 billion market cap for the education sector, and which is poised to reach around 180 billion in 2021. Now, out of this entire pie, we have 240 or 47 millions in 2016 as an edtech sector. Now, their estimation was by 2021, they will reach 2 billion. Out of this, this sector, the most interesting part in the edtech sector has what has happened from 2016 to now is the increase in the user paid user subscriptions. So while in 2016, the users who were actually paying were 1.5 million, it is estimated right now to be 10 million. So while there is a substantial increase, it's a phenomenal increase contributed by COVID. The other very interesting aspect is that not only it is increasing leaps and bounds, the penetration of the internet users from 2016 it has increased 40 to 50%, which means the users have increased, the paid users have increased, and the revenue streams of the edtech startups, which according to the business world estimation today was around 4,500 startups in edtech. And I think their estimation as per your report was around 450 edtech startups in the last 2 years. Naturally, this has become one of the most sought after investment companies. VC funding reports and other reports shows that the investment in the edtech has tripled in the last 2 years. 2020, it started with around, I think, 310 million investments in VC capital investments in edtech sector, and has reached, I think, by 2020 mid, because of COVID, to around 990 million. So it was almost tripled. While numbers are at one side, where are we posed with edtech is the interesting issue. I think what we will do through this session is go through the regulatory aspects of the regulatory sector of education as a whole versus the edtech sector, and what are the regulatory requirements and approvals and certifications that you would require to take for an edtech sector. And I'll lead through you while we go through the session.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you so much. Mr. Sindram, coming to you, big numbers there. What would be an in-house perspective on it, or just your general view on the subject?
So thank you so much, Ashima. The word crisis has two connotations. One connotation is danger, and the other connotation is opportunity. Right. So COVID gave us that opportunity in that when we talk about educational technology sectors, the entire opportunity came up because of the COVID situation, which was not by choice but under compulsion. And we saw so many startups in this segment, education technology. And just to augment what Seema said with those startling numbers, another report says that this sector in 2020-24, 5 years duration, is going to grow by 14.3 billion US dollars with an annual growth of some 20 to 21% per annum. That's the kind of growth that we are looking at. And I was going through the paper report of yesterday, and Baiju is scheduled to get listed. They are trying to get listed in the US exchange, and Baiju has been valued at 48 billion US dollars, and they claim to have 50 million registered students. So that's the kind of growth that we are seeing in these sectors. And of course, the catalyst has been the COVID situations. Another data shows that in India, there are around 4,500 educate companies in India, and some 435 companies came up during this period between 2019 and 2020. So that's the kind of growth that we are seeing in this sectors. Of course, India is growing at a very, very fast pace. And I must congratulate you for picking up such a important topic, because as we grow, there is a need to have a framework of regulations. There is a need to have statutes around these sectors. Otherwise, these sectors will become uncontrolled. Another important aspect that we must be aware of, that as COVID situation goes down over a period of time, the classes will open up physically. So is it going to be a kind of a hybrid mode, or is it just that COVID situation which propelled this growth and then the sector will die down? So let's analyze that during the course of our sessions. But good opening comments from Seema, and definitely a good way to lead the entire session.
Thank you, Mr. Sindram. Rightly said, some startling data points there. And Vinod, coming to you to add to this.
Yeah, so I think it's certainly natural that the Edtech sector is going to be a sunrise sector, because culturally Indians have always placed a lot of emphasis on education. And as we slowly move away from a socialist economy to a free market economy, not even slowly, we're doing that pretty fast. So there will be greater demand for skills-based training. I mean, the traditional educational models have certain merit and certain advantages. You get a degree which is recognized, which can be used to apply for government jobs. All of that is well and good, but there is also greater recognition of the need for just skills-based training. And after COVID, I think people have realized that you don't need to go to a classroom. You don't need to invest in a classroom. You can save a lot of money, and you save even more money if people don't have to commute. Teachers and students don't have to commute to their workplaces. Also, you don't need to be a student in an institution where you go there from 9 in the morning till 6 in the evening and all that to get a skill-based training. So you're a consumer in the tech sector, and you pay for a very specific knowledge or training or education to be imparted to you by a specialist, and you rate them, and if you're not happy, you leave negative feedback and you move on. So it's much more aggressive. It's definitely a deviation from our traditional Gurukul system and the traditional approach to teacher-student relationships. But I think this definitely is something very relevant for a free market economy, and I can only see it growing. I mean, there is no stepping back from it. It's not that the traditional schools and colleges are going to close down, but these are definitely needed to supplement them. And as lawyers, it's very important that they also be regulated, because unlike the traditional schools and colleges which are certified or inspected by government regulators and kept in check, these are largely in the Wild West. So there is a great, and we do have laws, and especially when it comes to data privacy, it's definitely a lot more needs to be done. We have a bill pending in Parliament, but laws and regulations play a very important role in the tech sector, both in terms of helping it grow and also in terms of preventing the excesses which can come with a sunrise sector.
Absolutely, Vinod, in the Wild West. So clearly, Seema, coming back to you to help us out of the woods and tell us a little more about the entry and exits of some of these platforms. How can they establish their offices in India? Now, the National Education Policy of 2020 also encourages online and technology-enabled learning. UGC and AICT, the authorities for higher education in India, have also released some sort of guidelines on this. So over to you to take us through this, please.
Sure. I think when we look at EdTech as a sector, see, this sector has a lot of symbiotic relationship with the regulated education sector. A lot of EdTech, let's look at the example of Byju's. They are providing coaching and for two young children who are in schools, but they're providing coaching to the young students to learn different classes. Same as a Khan Academy, same as with Extra Marks. There is a lot of symbiotic relationship. So at one end, you have K-12 and university, which is the higher education, colleges education, which is extremely regulated. And I'll just spend a few minutes on how to enter them, and then versus the edtech sector and why comparison makes edtech sector a much more interesting, dynamic, as I said in the beginning, and easy to enter, but also more competitive as compared to the other sector. So when you're looking at, there is a dichotomy between the education sector as such. First is you have a highly regulated sector, which is K-12, which is kindergarten to 12 classes. You need your school approvals, the NOCs from government before you even set up a school. You need board approvals, whether it is CBSE or other boards that you take. These are highly regulated interventions from government. Every step of the way you have RTs and you have compliances. These are annual compliances. You are checked. The most interfering part of the regulated sector, whether it is higher education or education sector in K-12 sector, is it is not for profit structure. Other than in states like Haryana and a few other states in the country, all of the sector is highly regulated because of the not-for-profit. It's considered as a service. You cannot call it as a business. It is a charitable activity, and therefore no profits can be given to the investors and the trustees of or members of the society which set up the sector. Now you have a situation where you have higher education. Higher education again requires a not-for-profit entities. It requires trust societies and Section 8 companies. Section 8 companies are again now allowed for higher education sector as well. And you have UGC, you have AICT, and you have various higher education guidelines and regulations streamlining, regulating, and certifying and checking every year. These are not once in lifetime approvals that you take. These are every year certification, and you people who are doing AICT approved colleges, they know how tedious and process driven is. Now let's look at the edtech sector and why this is so dynamic. The dynamism comes from the factor it is unregulated. There is no not-for-profit requirement here. You can come to India, set up a Section 8 company, set up a non-Section 8 company, a profit company, an LLP, a proprietary, not proprietorship if you're coming from outside of India. You can set up any of these structures, have 100% investment into these companies without any entry barriers, without any ceilings of investment whatsoever. Inform your investments to the government through your authorized dealer, and that's it. You're ready to go. You have your GST, your PAN, and the usual approvals that you require. Now, the second question is the same is applicable for, let's say, a school company. Now, if somebody wants to establish a school, can he come to India? Yes, he can. He can set up a Section 8 company. But from there, the real trouble starts. You have to go to the Mantralaya, you have to go to the education department, take an NOC, go to the board, take your affiliations. And there is a lot of infrastructure, minimum classroom, minimum teacher-student equation, and RTE approvals that you have to take. Now, if you're in EdTech, why is it so dynamic, and why is it that everybody wants to get into it? And as Amar had said, that there are 440 or odd startups in the last 1.5 years. That's mind-boggling. Why is it so? Because you set up a company, you have 100% investment in that company, whether it's an Indian investor or a foreign investor, no question asked, and you're ready to go. You have your systems and processes in place, you have your funding in place, provided you are funded, obviously. And there is no certification, there is no requirements in terms of government approval. It is a contactless government startup, which basically brings the ease of operation. Moment you have to go to government, there are processes, there are due diligences, and there are infrastructure requirements. EdTech is a sector where once you are ready to set with a company, you can move forward with it. Is there any certification required? Absolutely not. You do not need any AICTE, government, UGC requirements to be complied with. Are there minimum certifications? Suppose, for example, you're an extra mark or you're a Baiju. Is there any minimum certifications that you require to comply with? Absolutely not. Most EdTech companies, what are they doing right now? They are coming up with their own certification. They're saying, if you do my course, you will get a certification at the end of the course. Some of the companies are going and taking, let's say, they are certifying, there is a Google educator certification course. There's a Microsoft education. These are for educators and teacher courses. They certify, they tie up themselves as an EdTech startup with these larger companies to give credence to them, to give an acceptability to the consumers that here we are with a lot of quality assurance, and you can accept us as going forward. But it is a sector where no regulatory approvals are per se required. I mean, need we say anything more than that? And that's why it is dynamic. That is why the kind of VC funding that has come, because the gestation period in an education sector in K-12 and higher education is 7 to 8 years or even 10 years upward. And at the end of the day, it's a not-for-profit structure. Gestation in EdTech sector could be 2 to 3 or even maximum 4 years. And it's a profit-driven model. It is curated content. As long as the acceptability of your content is there, you're good to go. So I think it's a pretty interesting sector to be in.
Absolutely, Seema. Sorry, to add a follow-on question to that, when you mentioned that there are no certifications, so are we saying that the curriculum is absolutely without checks and balances? They could be teaching us anything whatsoever?
No. So when I say no checks and balances, there are no regulatory or government approvals. Now, I'll give you an example of a startup that we are advising right now. They are creating content for engineering colleges. What they're doing is they're mapping they've mapped as of now 15 public university. These are government university. They map the content of the government university in CS, in computer sciences, in civil engineering, mechanical engineering courses. The courses of the university is mapped. You create the content, then you go to the university saying that my entire content for teaching the students in the videos is mapped as per your curriculum. And therefore, it is in sync and symbiotic to what you're teaching. So when I say there is no regulatory mapping, there has to be quality content mapping. Otherwise, there would not be any customer acceptance. Similarly, if you look at Baiju or any other extra marks, they map their content as per the CBSE or ICSE or the curriculum that the schools are teaching. And then they work backward and create their own content. So the mapping is self-certification and self-acceptance, which will be, so that's why I said it's a symbiotic relationship between the online educators with the K-12 and higher education, because you cannot be teaching out of context, because student, as you see, the employability of students is the highest issue. They're not interested in learning per se. I mean, my own experience with working with startups, with working with established education companies, whether it is EdTech or educational companies which are regulated, is students are concerned with two things: marks and employability. Marks in the K-12 sector and employability in the above higher education sector. So everything has to be mapped back.
Absolutely. And also parents play a big role in all of this. So Mr. Sindram, coming to you to know, your experience with, say, an organization like Baiju's, and if you were in the in-house, department of one of these organizations, how would you look at some of these regulations? Obviously, a great place to do business, but what else would be red flags for you in this regard?
So Ashima, Seema brought out very nicely two components. One is K-12 segments, and that's what she's saying, that's a highly regulated segment. And the second is the edutech, and one of the reasons for its massive growth is because it's not that regulated, right? And so the larger question is, should we regulate it, and should we regulate it to the same extent as we have been regulating the K-12 model, right? So one is, should we regulate them? And second is, if the answer is yes, we should regulate them, should we regulate it to the same extent as we do K-12, right? So these are the two critical issues that we are talking about. I definitely believe, and telecom is one example, and we saw how telecom started, the growth it had, and then too much of regulations, too much of judgments, too much of policies issues. This sectors took a downward trend, right? A lot of consolidation happened in telecom. Now today, educate sector is growing and growing with leaps and bounds. Is there a need to regulate them? The answer is, in my opinion, the answer is yes. There is a need to regulate them. Should we have the same level of regulations, very high, stringent regulations? Probably not. It will kill the industry. Little bit of regulations is important to take care of some of the issues which is faced by these organizations. And that brings me to the question which you raised. And one interesting issue is definitely the issues like data privacy. Right. So data privacy, and couple of examples, and if you go by the media reports, and let me share a couple of these examples. We had the case of Unacademy. Unacademy reported a case of data breach of 20 million of its subscribers. So all email IDs, passwords, addresses, all these were hacked. Then we also, media report says White Hat Junior, personal data of 2.8 lakhs of students, their names of their parents, all these were very, very vulnerable because of some problem with their servers. We also had the case of Vedanta, Vedantu, which is a Bangalore-based educate, 7 lakhs user data compromise, right? So the question is that these edutech companies are getting a lot of personal data. A lot of students and professionals are getting subscribed and they are getting added to their accounts. The major challenge that these companies are facing is how to prevent the leakages of these data. Because if you are not able to prevent the leakages, the confidence will not get built. So as in-house counsels, if I have to lead one of these industry, probably my focus will be to a larger extent to ensure that these data of millions and millions of students and their parents are secured. We have a very robust system backed by a regulations, and Information Technology Act today is not sufficient to address those concerns. We are eagerly waiting for the PDB bill to become an act backed by a regulations on these data privacy. So my foremost attention would be on preventing these data leakages.
Thank you, Mr. Sindram. And a big concern there. And Vinod, coming to you, some of those data breaches and privacy, I'm sure you were also practicing in data protection and domain. You would know better as to how these can be avoided. And in an era where globally we have numerous data protection acts coming up, all of them seem to have an extra territorial jurisdiction. What would be your advice to some of these platforms coming in, establishing themselves in India, or having a subscriber base in India while they are based outside? So what are some of these things you would look into, especially when dealing with minors' data?
So data privacy and protection of personal data has been an important issue, or something which is shot into prominence since the European Union promulgated its first data privacy directive. It was sometime in 1995, and various member states of the EU have had data protection laws. And even if you're not based there, if you had dealings with the EU, you had to have some form of data privacy compliance. So subsequently, they had the GDPR, which is a lot more stringent. So in India, we've had a data privacy law. It's not really legislation, but a set of regulations framed under the Information Technology Act. which has been around since 2011. It's got a very long name, Reasonable Security Practices and Sensitive Personal Data or Information Rules, framed under Section 43A of the IT Act. Now, if you are a EdTech business, whether you are set up in India or you are targeting subscribers in India, you should be very familiar with these regulations. And we have a personal data protection bill, protection of personal data bill pending in Parliament, the 2019 draft. And now we have some changes being made to it by the Joint Parliamentary Committee. So that may come into effect soon, or it may take some more time. But until it does, anyone who is in the EdTech business needs to be very familiar with the 2011 rules. And these rules, even though they are not that very well drafted, they have all the fundamental requirements of data privacy law you find anywhere in the world. So it's very simple. If you are in this EdTech business, make sure you understand what exactly you're doing. Are you collecting personal data? Most probably you are. Now, are you collecting sensitive personal data? If you are collecting sensitive personal data, the obligations on you are a lot more stringent. And sensitive personal data is very clearly described in the 2011 rules. And there are 7-8 types of data, with personal data, which is called sensitive personal data. One is a password, any form of financial information. This could be a bank account, credit card details, debit card details, all of that. Your personal physiological or mental health condition details, sexual orientation, medical records and history, your biometrics. All of these are called sensitive personal data. So this is, you can say, it's a subset of personal data. Personal data is anything which can be used to identify an individual, and sensitive personal data is a subset of that. So try and if you are a EdTech business, try and map out what sort of data you collect from your customers and others. If you are collecting sensitive personal data, you will be a lot more careful. In any event, if you're collecting personal data, you need to have a privacy policy, which has to be published on your website. And this privacy policy will very, very clearly set out all your practices and policies. How do you collect personal data? How do you store it? Where is it stored? Which city is it stored? How easily is it accessible? Do you keep storing the data after the purpose for which it was collected has ended? You shouldn't do that unless it's strictly required for the purpose for which it was collected, or you are required by law. For example, anti-money laundering regulations may require you to retain certain data, certain financial records for a certain period of time, in which case you can, otherwise you shouldn't. All of this should go out in your privacy policy. That's to start with. Then when you collect data, if it's sensitive personal data, you should collect it only after getting the consent of the person you're collecting it from. If it's not sensitive personal data, at least inform the person that you are collecting personal data. Why are you collecting it? What is the purpose for which it is being collected? Where will you store it? And how long it will be stored? How long will you retain it? And usually, if you're a tech business, you're collecting student data, even the personal data, even if it's not sensitive, should be stored only as long as it's strictly required. Unless a law requires it or you need it for tax purposes, you don't store data after the person ceases to be a student. You use it only for the purpose it's been collected, which means you can't sell it off to some company which will then contact the student and try and sell them some other product. Unless the student has agreed that, hey, you can transfer my data to third parties who will, offer me solutions which are relevant for me. I mean, you find these kind of consent being taken. Make sure you're upfront about consent being collected, consent being taken. Don't misuse the data. And if you are transferring it to anybody else, make sure you get consent before transferring it. In certain cases, you can transfer it if you are using a data processor. You don't need consent. If the data processor is has a contract with you to only process it and not transfer it to anybody else, you may not need express consent. That's not a current law. So make sure you're familiar with existing laws. Make sure that you follow these very simple principles when you collect data, when you process it, when you store it. Don't store it more than it's strictly required. These are fundamental things you can do. And last but not the least, you should have good data security. Now, data security and data privacy are usually conflated, mixed up, but they're not the same. Data security is your obligation to make sure that the personal data you collect is properly stored. And if you don't do that, if you don't have reasonable security practices and processes, then under the Information Technology Act, under Section 43, you could be liable to pay compensation to whoever is a victim of such data privacy breach. So if someone hacks into your servers and makes off with the data of your students, it's quite possible the students can sue you for a data privacy breach, even though you didn't do anything about it, you didn't contribute it, provide if you did not have reasonable security practice and process. Now, if you had reasonable security practice and process, you had a good security policy, and you had documented all of that in writing, under the 2011 rules, you're meant to not only have good security policy practices and good systems, but also document all of that. If you meet all those requirements, but despite that, if somebody hacks in, then you are protected because you have discharged your obligation to reasonable security practice and process. But if you didn't, even if you didn't contribute to it, then you could be liable to pay compensation to the person who is a victim under Section 43A of the Information Technology Act. So these are certain things you can do. And once the new bill comes into effect, once it's passed by Parliament, the PDP Bill 2019, with whatever changes has been proposed by the Joint Parliamentary Committee, then India will have a data privacy law which is practically on par with GDPR, with a few crucial differences. But then the compliance burden will go up a bit more. You will have to make sure that you give them the right to opt out. It's a lot more in your face. It's not that the 2011 rules don't have that. It's in a much more rudimentary form, and there is no independent authority enforcing it. Once the new bill comes into effect, there is a data protection authority who will be enforcing all that. People can file complaints. Under the existing law, there is a controller under the IT Act to whom, if you can complain about any breach of law, but frankly, there aren't even too many cases, and there is no precedent for getting huge amount of damages. Once the new act comes into effect, there will be a grievance redressal mechanism and an authority to whom you can complain, an independent regulator. It's quite possible that there will be a lot of litigation and a lot of cases going up to this tribunal set up under the act. So we are in for an exciting time. But if you are in the edtech business, definitely you should be cognizant of the 2011 rules and be fully prepared for the new bill, which is with the new law, which will be coming into effect anytime soon.
Thank you, Vinod. Thank you so much for packing in so much information in that little time. I'm sure that makes for part of the playbook that all these organizations can use. Coming back to Mr. Sindram on this, Mr. Sindram, would you like to add more on any other law or intersection of law that you would be mindful of in the case where currently we are so unregulated for these organizations, or any other expectations from you of the sector?
Yeah, so two things. The first is I'm still grappling to understand whether these edutech companies would fall under the definition of e-commerce companies, whether they fall under the Consumer Protection Act, where students becomes the consumer and these educational institutions becomes the service provider, while there is a judgment from NCDRC which says that educational institutions are not to be brought within the ambit of Consumer Protection Act. But what happens to the coaching institutions? What happens to the edutech companies? So there is a little bit of an ambiguity which is still prevailing. National education policy is talking about taking out the ambit of UGC for as far as the online courses are concerned. How will these online courses will be regulated? So there appears to be a lot of ambiguity. What is also important to talk about, Ashima, is while we are seeing a growth in these sectors, what is equally important to talk about is what are the constraints, what are the challenges which this sector is witnessing. And one of the major challenges that at least I am seeing it is there is a complete digital divide in India, right? And this sector is totally dependent on internet connectivity and the smartphones. And some of the data, let me share a couple of data which will make my point. So only 8% of all households with members in the age group of 5 to 24 years have access to both computers and internet. Only 8%. Only 24% of Indians, they own smartphones. And let's see the digital divide between the urban and the rural segments. In the urban areas, 23.4% have computers, 42% have internet connectivity, but when you go to the rural sectors, this drops down to 4.4% computers and 14.9% of internet facilities. So while these sectors offer a huge opportunity, right? The question is that unless we have the support from the government, and national education policy does talk about many of those supports, but those things has to come into reality. Unless there is a tremendous support from the government, this sector will not grow from here. It has grown, it has come to a level. For example, the power. I mean, this entire sector is dependent on a steady source of electricity. Do we have a steady 24 hours source of electricity? There are so much of an interruption. If you go to the rural sectors, you will have an analysis where how many people have an uninterrupted supply of powers. So this sector is dependent on various infrastructural augmentation which is required in India. Only when those infrastructural augmentation happens, this sector is going to go to the next level. So it has come to a level, but in order to go to the next level, those infrastructural support is required, which would also include some regulations on the regulatory aspects of it. So digital, we also talked about online bullying. I was going through a media report in January 2021, National Commission of Women, the chairperson said that online bullying, online harassment has increased by 5 times. We have witnessed this, right? Many of the tech companies have witnessed online harassments. Now, these are the issues where there is no legislation around this. There is definitely a need to have a standalone legislation dealing with this great growing sectors. We should address all of these concerns. So need for legislation is definitely there. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Sindram, for bringing that to light. And Seema, would you like to address some of those concerns or how they can be best dealt going forward? Concepts like online bullying, of course, there are infrastructural issues that Mr. Sindram spoke about. And of course, the consumer rights. There have been reports or news about how some of these platforms have a high-handedness or heavy-handedness kind of an attitude. They're curt with their students. Now, what can a consumer in this aspect do, and how can this sector grow and avoid a plateau?
So I couldn't agree more with Amar here. And see, basically, the only difference I have with him on this issue is, I think the best way to kill a sector is to overregulate it. The best way to, and we've seen that in telecom, we've seen that in power, we've seen that in several other sectors. We've seen that in the slow growth of the satellite industry. And now the government is talking to go from one over-regulation to minimal touch regulations scenario. Now, we have a very dynamic education sector. We have an edtech sector which is showing so much of promise that we have garnered so much of investment in the sector. While there is a requirement to regulate the nuts and bolts of the industry as such, whether there are certain consumer protections available, where there is a bullying aspects being covered, whether the data protection is being covered, I agree with all of them, and I'll deal with each of them briefly. But do we need to regulate the sector as such to create certain minimum approvals and requirement? No. Do we need certain minimum certifications? Yes, that is something that we can look at. Now, let's look at from a consumer point of view. How do they protect themselves? Because when we look at a sector, which is an edtech sector, they are a group. They are far more powerful now. And you are then on the other side looking at a student who is possibly paying 3,000 or 5,000 rupees an annum. He's not going to, as an individual entity, he's never going to, litigate with the big edtech company to secure his rights. Now, Amar has mentioned, and Vinod has also mentioned, and what are the data protection policies that we have? In addition to the data protection policies that the new bill is going to, secure the protection of the privacy and the data of the consumer. What is being done by the government is they have brought in the new IT regulation where the cyber bullying part, which Amar has raised, has been taken care of. If you are a social media company or a company which is providing services online, there is a higher level of responsibility that the government has brought in with the new IT regulations. These regulations do require you to identify at the last recourse who has originated a bullying content, take out the person who is being bullied can report it to the online company. The online company is required to identify that person and take out the content within a particular time frame which is there in the IT regulation. So some part of the bullying has been addressed through these IT regulations. And these regulations are more stringent for social media companies like Facebooks and Instagram, obviously, but it has some ramification for any industry which is providing online services, which will address some of the issues that Amar has raised. Coming to the consumer protection, Edtech services company are going to fall under the consumer protection realm because they are providing services. There are certain discrepancies whether education is a services entity or it's a service or it's not a service. But edtech technology companies who are providing services to consumers which are outside the realm of K-12 education and higher education will fall under the realm of consumer protection, and unfair trade practices, monopolistic trade practices, or any kind of pricing issues can be dealt by the consumer. The question is not whether the law is there. The question is, what is the enforcement? India is well poised for having maximum number of laws as any country can have. We have laws on every sector of you can think of. But what is the enforcement? I think the largest problem that we face, not only in EdTech, but for any sector in India, is the enforceability, the process of enforceability. 25 years back, when the Consumer Protection Act was brought in, the intent was the consumer himself, even if he has 5 rupee claim, he can go and litigate himself. And within 6 to 8 months, that consumer protection complaint would be addressed. What is the state of the consumer protection forums right now? It takes 10 years for you to proceed and get anything out. Who has the patience? The question is, what are the checks and balances we have vis-a-vis the enforceability of any law that you bring in? Will a customer, a student who is preparing for, let's say, GATE examination or K-12 examination, will he have the wherewithal, the patience, and the intent, and the most important, the resources to deal with the lawyers and go to the law firms and ask for his 5,000 rupees claim to be brought in? That is where, whenever somebody talks about regulation, I say, no, we have enough regulation. What we need is the enforceability aspect. Where we are right now with our aspect of justice delivery system, I think that is the biggest loophole. Because I'm a corporate commercial lawyer, the biggest issues that we face when the FDI comes to India is that your legal systems are not robust. Your legal regulations are robust. The enforceability and the justice delivery systems are not robust. I think that is a focus that the government should say. They should leave edtech sector from outside the regulatory purview, other than protection of bringing the data privacy and consumer protection, but enforceability systems and judicial delivery has to be improvised.
Great point, Seema. Thank you so much. I think that sums up a lot that the sector needs and what is going right with the sector. We'll do another round of just closing comments from everyone for your final takeaways for our audiences. Vinod, coming to you, your closing remarks, please.
I think this is a very exciting phase. Now I do a lot of data privacy work. I also do a lot of work with respect to companies, foreign investors investing in Indian companies and companies being set up. So the edtech space is definitely the space to watch for. The one comment I want to make is that I personally feel it shouldn't be regulated, because I use the example of the software industry, the IT sector. It really grew as long as there was zero regulation. I think we should do the same, and to give a level playing field. If at all we need to create a level playing field with the other end of the educational system, which is the regulated entities, the K-12 and the universities. Maybe there should be less regulation there as well. Make it easier to run schools and colleges. I mean, maybe we should relook at this policy that schools and colleges have to be run only on a not-for-profit basis, because we know that many private players are not doing it on a not-for-profit basis. So why should one chunk of the whole industry be heavily regulated, while the other chunk have a total free ride? So rather than regulate the ones doing well, I think we should relook at all the regulations we have, and as Seema rightly said, India is a world leader in the number of rules we have, and we are not enforcing even half of them. And our system is such that a lot needs to be done before there is efficiency in enforcing them. So we should definitely try and remove a lot of regulations. For example, if you want to run a medical college in India, to set up a medical college, the infrastructure cost as prescribed by the medical council is so high. You need to have so much infrastructure that it becomes prohibitively expensive. While you can go to a country in Eastern Europe or even in a Central Asian Republic or even China, like Wuhan had a lot of medical colleges and a lot of students, Indian students doing medicine there because it's a lot cheaper. And if those countries can offer medical education on a commercial basis to foreign students from India at a cheaper cost, then there is something wrong with the way we are regulating our medical colleges and universities in India. So we need to relook at all that. I don't think we should regulate the edtech sector. We should kind of reduce or whittle away the regulations which are pulling back or pulling down our traditional education system. But I think on the whole, as a lawyer, I think we are in for an exciting phase, especially with respect to data privacy. I hope the new bill comes into effect, because that, despite a few shortcomings, on the whole is a welcome change, because not just because it's much better drafted. The 2011 rules are so badly drafted. It's a nightmare plodding through them and figuring out what exactly they're trying to say. But on the whole, we are in for an exciting phase, and I'm sure that the edtech sector is just going to grow with the help of lawyers or without them.
Thank you, what a positive spin there. So thank you so much for that. Mr. Sindram, coming to you for your closing remarks. And would you agree that we need to bring out our other sectors from the rigmarole of compliances that they are currently in?
Yeah, so Ashima, let me talk little different from what we have spoken so far. And and I see it from the lens of a student. So if I am a student, when I get myself enrolled, what is that I am looking at? We have not talked about from that perspective. What is equally important for this sector to really stabilize and grow further from here is the creativity, the innovation. Most of the products which are being offered by this large number of edutech companies, 4,500 plus edutech companies we have. If you see and compare these products, by and large, these products are very, very similar, right? And that is where there is a need to have innovation, creativity attached to have diversified products. Many of these courses and products should be aligned with the professional courses and professional education that we are talking about, right? The K-12 model, the universities and colleges education system still looks at the old course curriculum, the course models, but this is the area where we can talk about a lot about new things, new areas of learning, and therefore augmenting the base course. So, for example, since we are all lawyers, in the arena of law, if you go back and see some of the law courses curriculum in many of these universities, these are all old courses. We still learn the old courses, which is good to learn, but are we augmenting it further? And that is where these edutech companies comes in, where they bring in new elements, new laws, and augment that, right? So creation of course content is very, very vital. Having quality teachers, professionals enrolled in these, who teaches the professional aspects of the entire course. These are another very important aspect that we should be mindful of, because over a period of time, if these innovative and creative things doesn't happen, this industry is going to take a backseat. Right? We need to have a lot of creativity, quality of educations, and these professionals should be paid well. So unlike a hardcore teaching segment where the teachers and the academicians are not paid as much as a corporate professionals, when we are talking about edutech as a professional organizations, right? These are the sectors where the professionals needs to be paid. So these are my closing comments, Ashima.
Thank you, Mr. Sundam. Certainly, traditionally, we believe learning is what happens outside of schools and colleges. So certainly a time to look at quality education, coming from EdTech or in our existing system. Seema, your closing comments, please.
So as lawyers, we love regulations. We love the complication of regulation because that's where the clients need us. But from an industry's perspective, I think EdTech should definitely not be regulated. That we've all said it multiple times. What is needed is, as Amar had raised a point earlier, is that the penetration of EdTech sector, which is right now minuscule, can go leaps and bounds only when the larger population, the large masses of this country has edtech facilities. Now, this is where the PPP model will work. If edtech has to grow forward in this country, the government will have to step in, because edtech companies are not hugely funded. They're funded for creating edtech programs, but they do not have facilities and wherewithal to start supplying now infrastructure, which was I think the Educom model of providing smart classes with technology and hardware, which was a little hard to implement after a point of time. I think the PPP model will work wonders here, because for example, the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan of Government of India, which was a highly successful model because it encouraged the PPP model. The computer education that the government was able to bring in the early 90s and the 2000s was big under the aegis of this program, where the government invited the companies like Microsoft and other IT companies to provide education, IT education to the schools, government schools, and the content was provided by them, but the hard infrastructure, the computerization of the schools were provided by the government. The level of wonders that program did and created some awareness of IT penetration in the country was amazing. I think if the edtech sector has to grow, leave the regulation apart, leave the certification away, the government should focus only in providing the infrastructure to the government schools for higher penetration of edtech into the entire country.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you so much for giving us the roadmap, and to all our panelists today for your expert views in giving us some of these terrific insights into the sector. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to having more such discussions with you in the future. Thank you so much.